So in this topic we are going to study how we derive energy. So the food we eat, from this food we get glucose, and from this glucose molecule we will get energy. So what happens is that the food which is digested, and from the digested food this glucose is absorbed in the blood vessel, and from this blood vessel the glucose goes to each and every cells of our body. So how does these cells will get energy from this glucose, that we are going to study. So first we will study what is glucose. Now glucose is a 6 carbon molecule, means for simple understanding you imagine that these are 6 balls, 6 cricket balls, and they are joined by a stick. So this is a glucose molecule, and this cricket ball represent a carbon molecule. So the glucose is 6 carbon joined by a covalent bond. Now we will understand the basic of energy, that how energy is get, or we require energy from bond breaking. Let's say this is two molecule and this is the bond between them. If you break this bond, if you if you break this bond, then the energy will be released. Or if these are two balls, two molecules, and if you want to make a bond between them, the energy will be required. So what happens is that the glucose, there are many bonds. So what we will do, we will break these bonds, and when we will break these bonds the energy will be released. So this is how we get energy from glucose, that we break the bond of the glucose. The glucose comes from food, so this food gives us energy in this way. We all know that the food we eat gives us energy, but how? The food, from the food the glucose is taken, and the glucose goes to each and every cell. And here the glucose, we know it is a 6 carbon molecule, means 6 carbon molecule joined by bonds, and when we break this bond the energy is released. This is how we get energy. So energy released during bond breaking, when we break a bond, this is exothermic, and this is endothermic. Endo means energy required to make a bond. So how does this glucose breakage take place in different cells? We know there are wide variety of organisms like bacteria, humans. There are, this world is millions of year old, millions, billions of year old. So get one thing clear, that every organism will not get energy from glucose, will not get energy from glucose in the same method. Means there will be different method in different organism. We all know that we are all different. So which methods does different organism takes place to get energy from glucose, that we are going to study. So before studying the actual method, I am going to explain to you one simple example. Let's say you and your brother or sister, maybe you and your brother are at home, and you brought a cabbage. Now you are very hungry and you want to make something out of cabbage. So you and your brother went in the kitchen. So first step what you will do is you will cut the cabbage. Means if you want to make anything which is salad, sabji, or even a Manchurian. You know what is Manchurian? It is a dish made from cabbage. It's very tasty. So if you want to make any of it, the first step is same. Means even if you want to make salad, you need to cut the cabbage into pieces. Even if you want to make sabji, you have to cut it first. Even if you want to make this one, you have to cut it. So first step you and your brother did is cut them. Now what happened is that you don't know in the kitchen where there are masala. So let us take first condition in which you did not get any masala from your kitchen. You try finding them, but you didn't get anything. So what you did was you just make salad, which is nothing, just putting salt in these pieces, and you made salad because you didn't get any of the masalas. The next step, imagine a different condition in which you got some masala. Means open the drawer and you got some masala, like masala which is just enough to make sabji. And if you want this kind of dish, you need many masala, means Manchurian, you need Manchurian sauce, and you need all the masalas. So if you get some masala, you will make sabji. And if you get all the masalas which are required to make Manchurian, then you will make Manchurian. So what I am trying to explain you is that the final product that you made depends on the condition. Means the first condition, you have no masala, so you made a salad. In the second condition, you have some masala, that you made some sabji. So these conditions define the product which is made. So what you have to understand here is that the basic step, this basic step is same in all this, but the different condition, after this different condition leads to different products. This is the same thing which will happen in this one. This is the same thing which happens in glucose, that the first step which is glucose. So let us imagine you ate food. From this food you get glucose, and now you want to derive energy from this glucose. So what you will do is that, inside the cell comes this glucose molecule. We know from the blood the glucose is transported into the cell. So this glucose molecule, 6 carbon molecule, is broken into 3 carbon molecule. So 6, here it is broken from the center into this 3 carbon molecule. This 3 carbon molecule is called pyruvate. So we can say that the glucose converts into pyruvate, and in this process energy is released. Why energy is released? We all know that when the bond breaks, there is a release of energy when the bond breaks. So here this bond broke into 2 molecules, so there is release of energy, and this takes place in the cytoplasm. So that's the same thing I told you, that this glucose, which is a 6 carbon molecule, is broken down into pyruvate, which is a 3 carbon molecule, and energy is released. And where does this happen? In the cytoplasm. Now I am relating you this one with this example, that this pyruvate is formed. Now this pyruvate will make different products, this one, this one, this one, this and this, based on different condition. Likewise here you saw that first we cut down the cabbage. If you want to make anything, the first step is same way here. The initial step is same, that the glucose is broken down into pyruvate, 6 carbon molecule broken into 3 carbon molecule, and some energy is released. Why? Because here bond is breaking. Whenever we break something, energy is released. If we break, energy will be released. So here glucose is broken and energy is released. So now what is the, here which was the limiting factor? Limiting factor means the factor because of which this product is formed. Here we saw that the masala, because of this masalas different things were formed. So what will happen here is that here the factor is oxygen. If the body of organism or anyone get enough oxygen, high amount of oxygen, then this pyruvate is converted into carbon dioxide, water, and energy. How it is converted, I will teach you. So let's say this is the pyruvate, and we know pyruvate is a 3 carbon molecule. If we get enough energy, then this pyruvate is converted into carbon dioxide. Here it carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Why? Because we are breaking these bonds of pyruvate also, and due to this bond breaking, energy is released. This happen only when there is oxygen. High amount of oxygen break pyruvate into carbon dioxide and water. So here this pyruvate, in the presence of oxygen, breaks into carbon dioxide, water, and energy, where inside the mitochondria. So this is what you saw, that the glucose 6 carbon molecule is broken down into pyruvate. Now this pyruvate will go inside this mitochondria, and here in this mitochondria, with the help of oxygen, the pyruvate is broken down into carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Why energy? Because we are breaking this pyruvate in order to get energy. How? The food gives glucose, the glucose give energy. So all this reaction we are doing to get energy only. So this pyruvate goes in mitochondria. The simple thing you need to understand is that the pyruvate goes in mitochondria. Mitochondria, inside that it breaks and the energy is released. And now if something is breaking, then there will be small pieces or final product from this. So this final product formed are carbon dioxide and water, and the energy is released because we have broken pyruvate. Now why does this happen? Because here we had full oxygen amount. Now there will be conditions where, okay, so first we learn this condition. Now imagine that you are doing exercise or you are playing a lot. So in this procedure there is lack of oxygen, means the muscle cell, we know that when we play, the muscles get contract and relaxed, means with the help of muscles we do that job. So when we are playing a lot, we are playing very much, we don't get enough oxygen, means normally we are getting oxygen to do our respective works, but if we require more oxygen and we do not get that oxygen, then what happens? We all know that if we play we will require energy. So in that case, the muscle cell, what they do is they convert pyruvate into lactic acid, and in this process energy is released in all process, because the topic is it that we are deriving energy from glucose. So the pyruvate is broken down into lactic acid in muscle cells when there is lack of oxygen. Here full oxygen was present, so they made carbon dioxide and water. Here in lack of oxygen they do lactic acid. They make lactic acid. Now one thing you need to realize is that when pyruvate is fully broken down, energy released is more, and when pyruvate is not broken down in presence of full oxygen, there is less energy released. So in this process more energy will be released, in this process less energy will be released. But why are we doing this process? Why can't we do this process in muscle cell? Because in muscle cells sometimes there is lack of oxygen, and we require energy even when oxygen is less. So we do another process from which pyruvate is broken down into lactic acid. Same as here, we all love Manchurian. We don't, no one likes sabji of salad, but there were only some masala. So we don't have this option. So we do this process. In the same way here in the muscle cell, there is less oxygen sometimes. When you play and when you do physical exercises, there is less oxygen. So a different process takes place in which pyruvate 3 carbon molecule is converted into lactic acid and energy is released in these muscle cells. So inside this muscle cell, we saw that this 3 carbon molecule, which is pyruvate, is converted into 3 carbon molecule only, which is lactic acid, and some energy is released. Now we know that when we do exercise or anything, we feel tired. Now what actually is the reason? Why do we feel tired? So what actually is the reason that we feel tired? It is due to this molecule lactic acid. This lactic acid is the reason why we feel tired. Due to the molecular activity of this lactic acid, we feel tired, or there you have heard the cramps in the muscles. That is exactly due to this lactic acid. Now, you know how alcohol is made? The alcohol is made by a special process called fermentation. Now, I am only teaching you the basic of how it is made, not the actual method. Let's say this is sugar. So what will happen that in this sugar some yeast will be put. You take a bowl of sugar, and in that sugar you dissolve this sugar in water or anything. So this is a sugar. In this a yeast is molecule. Now what is yeast? Yeast is a fungi. Small unicellular fungi, yeast, are put in this. Now what does yeast do? Yeast will utilize this glucose to make energy from it. So what we'll do, the first step we all know that this glucose will be converted into pyruvate in the cytoplasm of These yeast cells, these are the yeast cells, small unicellular organisms which are put in this glucose or sugar. We all know that sugar have glucose. So this glucose in this sugar is converted into pyruvate inside the yeast cell as the yeast cell take up the glucose. Now this pyruvate is converted into ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. Now how does this happen? I'm going to teach you. So what happens is that first the glucose, which is a 6 carbon molecule glucose, is converted into pyruvate, 2 pyruvate molecules. Now this pyruvate is again broken down. This one makes carbon dioxide and this one makes ethanol, and this ethanol is alcohol only. This is CO2 and this is ethanol, and we know ethanol is a 2 carbon molecule and CO2 has 1 carbon. Ethanol has 2 carbon, CO2 has 1 carbon. So this bond of pyruvate is broken. So here also energy is released. Now when does this process takes place? This process takes place when there is no oxygen, complete absence of oxygen. In this process there is complete absence of oxygen. So when there is no oxygen, the cells are forced to do this method. The yeast cells, without oxygen, they do this process to derive energy, because at the end of the day, at last, we want energy from this pyruvate. So if there is no oxygen, we go for this process. So this is what it is saying, that glucose is converted into first pyruvate here also, and then this pyruvate 3 carbon molecule is broken into ethanol and carbon dioxide, 2 carbon and 1 carbon molecule, and some energy is released. And this is in the absence of oxygen, and this ethanol is alcohol only. So now when we do this process is called fermentation, means yeast ferment the sugar. When how this process is actually done, there are big containers like this. In this container the sugar is put. In this sugar the yeast grows in this sugar, and this reaction takes place inside the yeast, in which the glucose is converted into pyruvate, then this pyruvate is converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide. This ethanol is alcohol, so we purify this alcohol from this method, and this method is called fermentation. Now why they are done in a packed container? Because in the packed container only there is absence of oxygen. So this fermentation process is done in packed container where oxygen cannot go in. So after this fermentation process, the product of ethanol is formed, and this ethanol or alcohol is used commercially and to sell it. So this is how they make alcohol. And why yeast is doing this process? Yeast is not doing this process to make alcohol. Yeast is doing this process to get energy for living. So the food, which is sugar, is taken up by the yeast. From this sugar the yeast make glucose. From this sugar, in this sugar there is glucose, and yeast uptake this glucose and do this process to get energy. But ethanol or alcohol is a byproduct of this process, so we take yeast and do such processes in a big container and we get ethanol from this process. So this was fermentation. So now we are going to quickly revise all 3 processes. We are first starting from the food. So let's imagine here that you ate food, you ate sugar. So from that sugar you will get glucose, and that glucose inside the cytoplasm will be converted into pyruvate, means the 6 carbon molecule, we break it into 3 carbon molecule and we get energy. And now this pyruvate goes in 3 different mechanisms based on whether there is absence of oxygen, lack of oxygen, lack means less oxygen, absence of oxygen, lack of oxygen, or presence of oxygen means high oxygen is there. There are 3 different processes. If there is high oxygen, then the pyruvate is completely broken down. We break pyruvate completely into carbon dioxide, water and energy. Here high energy we get, here we get low energy, because this is not complete breakage of pyruvate. This is just like काम चलाओ method, or in which the pyruvate is converted into lactic acid when there is less oxygen. But the preferred method is this, the main method, which occurs in mitochondria, and we get carbon dioxide. Now What is complete breakage of pyruvate? Pyruvate Complete breakage of pyruvate refers only when all carbon of this pyruvate comes out in the form of carbon dioxide. Here carbon is there in lactic acid. That is not complete breakage. When all carbon comes in the form of carbon dioxide means there is no other byproduct, only carbon dioxide. And this water don't have carbon. The water and carbon dioxide, it is the complete breakage of pyruvate which occurs in mitochondria. And obviously when if you break something completely, then all the energy is released. So high energy is released here, and this is incomplete breakage, so less energy is released here. And when does this happen? That in muscle cells, when during exercise and all, if we get less oxygen, then this pyruvate is converted into lactic acid, and this due to this lactic acid, now what happens is that this process takes place inside the muscle cell. So inside the muscle cell, this pyruvate will be converted into lactic acid, and this lactic acid will cause tiredness of the muscle cell, and the entire muscle of the body, entire muscle of that area is tired. So this is how we feel tiredness when we do exercise. And you say that, and keep one thing in mind, the energy is released in all process because we are doing this to release the energy only. So this process is done, and this process is fermentation, and this takes place in yeast. What are yeast? Yeast are unicellular organism in which this fermentation takes place, and the important byproduct of fermentation is ethanol, which is actually the alcohol. And the process is called fermentation, and the initial step is same. First pyruvate will be formed, then pyruvate goes in these different pathways to make different energy. So now we have discussed all three processes. So now we will discuss what is aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic and anaerobic respiration. This whole process is respiration only, in which energy is derived from glucose. This is respiration. Respiration is the process in which we get energy from glucose. So which of these do you think is aerobic, and which of these do you think is anaerobic? First understand what is aerobic and anaerobic. So here the aerobic, you can relate it with air, and air we all know is oxygen. So the process in which oxygen is used is called anaerobic, is called aerobic. Air or oxygen is used. The process in which oxygen is not used is called N. N means here it is not used, oxygen not used. So here this process takes place in presence of oxygen. So this is aerobic breakdown, and in the yeast, inside this yeast, it takes place in absence of oxygen. Why does it take place in absence of oxygen? Because here the oxygen is not used, and to ensure that oxygen is not used in this, we put this yeast into container to make ethanol. So here it takes place in absence of oxygen. So this is anaerobic respiration, and this which happens in mitochondria is aerobic respiration. So this is all about aerobic and anaerobic respiration.